Yeah, like, of course. Let's talk about running backs. Who's going up against a stout defense? And, of course, the Broncos no longer count. So if they're on your list, throw the whole thing out.
So you want to start with the hardest or the easiest?
No, let's go easiest. Let's talk about guys that you should be happy you have.
All right. So Tennessee's number one, and obviously you're not too happy if you own those running backs right now because it's been such a committee. But this is just a reminder, if one of them emerges, whether Henry goes down or DeMarco, more likely guy to go down, he has a knee ailment, he's practicing in full right now. It seems like he comes up with something new every week that gets hurt. It just seems like a matter of time before DeMarco goes down. So you got to hold on to Derrick Henry, especially with this playoff stretch, especially if you're in good position to do so. If one of those guys emerges as the lead guy, they have such an easy schedule. It's unbelievable. So Tennessee from weeks 14 through 16, the easiest. Philadelphia, our guy Jay Ajayi getting traded there. We've talked about how it looked unbelievable that first game against the stout Broncos defense. The lanes were wide open. They were in the red zone constantly. Now he gets the second easiest playoff schedule too. So let's say he does inherit feature back work. He's going to be an absolute stud down the stretch. And we have some mailbag questions about him coming up. But his playoff schedule is completely juicy. So Jay Ajayi, somebody I would definitely be targeting as an owner, because if the guy who owns him is in bad position and you're in a great one, the surrounding situation is so much better for him. And then you look at his playoff schedule, not something I even looked at when I was doing my rest of season big board before, and Ajayi had jumped up to my RB9. This only gives him further ammunition for why you should be targeting Jay Ajayi. The other good running backs here, Houston at 3. Now, we talked about how Tom Savage has the hardest playoff schedule. Lamar Miller has the third easiest. So you got to think that that's going to be just a complete run-centric attack moving forward. And then Donta Foreman, too, in case something ever happened to Lamar Miller. That's another reason why he's such a good stash is if Miller goes down or Foreman steals the job, such an easy playoff schedule. Detroit at number 4 for running backs, which I don't really give a shit about. Abdullah's been awful. He had 21 carries for like 40 yards last week, fumbled twice. You can't trust a Detroit running back moving forward, easy playoff schedule or not. And then Atlanta has the 5th. So I know Devonta Freeman's lost a lot of steam lately. Tevin Coleman's been, a sturdy 8 or 9, but it seems kind of flukish because a lot of that's just touchdowns. Yeah, you look at the running back schedule for those guys, and it's pretty damn easy in the playoffs. So Freeman might be an interesting buy low guy right now as someone who's going to see some volume and you get a much easier schedule in those last 3 weeks. I like targeting Freeman here down the stretch if you're a playoff-minded owner.
Man, the Falcons running backs has been a real conundrum this year. You're right. Coleman his point output seems to really be tied to touchdowns, which seems fluky, but hasn't that always kind of been his deal?
Yeah, it kind of always has, and he's always found his way to stumble in. I still like Coleman. I like Freeman. I think they're both sturdy backs for the stretch run, and obviously if one of them went down, the other would just explode, similar to the Henry and DeMarco situation, except I think both those guys have much more standalone value than their counterparts. But yeah, a nice buy low opportunity, I'd say, on those guys, especially if you're looking towards forward to the playoffs.
What do you think about guys on the Eagles? What do you think about like LeGarrette Blount? Like, where do you put his value right now? I mean, it obviously takes a hit with Ajayi coming into town.
It takes a huge hit, and especially after out of the most involved backs last week, it was Corey Clement, not LeGarrette Blount. And I think that's going to switch to favor Jay Ajayi once he's more acclimated with the offense and the team's more comfortable with him. But with Corey Clement kind of inheriting potentially a goal line vulture role, what does that leave for LeGarrette Blount? If Jay Ajayi takes the main 12 to 15 carries,
not much.
Corey Clement takes a lot of the goal line touches, where does he fit in? I have no idea.
Yeah, I think his value is. I mean, I'll still bet he gets some carries, but I don't think he has any sort of value. I don't think you can roll him out really for anything.
I think he's cuttable at this point unless Jay Ajayi went down. I don't see him having any real season-long value. I'd rank the backs there. Jay Ajayi, obviously our number 1 guy, and then Corey Clement be number 2. And then from there, I don't really care about the rest.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, I think I'm going to wait a week. I have him on a team. I think I'm going to wait a week and see how it shakes out just because things seem to fluctuate so much. If he doesn't get any sort of burn, I think I'm probably going to cut him or just try to do something with him.
Yeah, it makes sense to wait. You're right, because if you have him at this point and there's nothing out there that's appetizing or intriguing to you,
There's not.
You're right. So at that point, just wait and see how it goes, see how the workload's distributed, because the schedule's a joke, like we just said. The line's awesome. I mean, the situation's very valuable for whoever's getting the work there. It's just a matter of how is it going to be distributed. I think Jay Adiagi's going to take over the most of it, and Corey Clement might get some touchdowns here. Is Corey Clement available? Because I'd probably cut Blunt for him.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I would check that before I hang on to Blunt. I would say he has some more season-long value than Blunt does.
Let's talk about some running backs that are going to be running into the Lions' den, as it were. Who's going up against a particularly stout run defense that might scare you away a little bit?
So in the weeks 14 through 16, some tough schedule here would be Oakland's number 28. And a lot of these, it's interesting because it flips. Like the quarterback had such a good matchup,
right,
and the running back, or vice versa, like we saw with Houston. Derek Carr has the second easiest schedule, but Marshawn Lynch has the fifth hardest one. So that means they're just going to be airing that ball out a ton if the coaches are smart. I'd say this is a good sell high with Lynch coming off by far his best game of the year, 2 TDs, and he has a decent schedule for the next couple of weeks. If you're looking for the playoffs right now, I'd say try to find a win now guy that wants a running back that's coming off a good game. Sell Marshawn Lynch, because in the playoffs he's going to be running against brick walls. The Giants, similar, they got Eli Manning the third easiest, but then the 29th hardest schedule. The thing that goes against that, and we'll probably talk a little bit about this, is just in terms of matchup calendar, who's win now. Darkwa has a great right now schedule. His next few games are absolute cake matchups. But then when you get to the playoffs, Darkwa could completely falter. So he's a guy that if you're in win now mode, this week he gets San Fran, which is the easiest. Kansas City hasn't been great. Washington hasn't been great. Then Oakland's the 7th easiest. So right now, Darkwa makes sense to target. But then playoffs, he gets Philly, who's 29th, Arizona 25th, and then Washington 19th. So he doesn't have a great schedule moving forward. If you need a win now guy, I like Darkwa because it's easy, but in the playoffs, not so much. And then this one's kind of intriguing here. Number 30 here for running backs in the playoffs is Mr. Todd Gurley, the number 2 on my big board right now. Has a really hard schedule. That doesn't mean I'm running out there to sell him by any means, though, because he's just so involved as a receiver. When you look at these things, you got to keep that in mind, too. He's such a versatile threat that maybe he won't, get a ton of room on the ground, but he's going to catch his balls. He's going to rack up his touchdowns. So, if the Gurley owners, if you want to kind of dangle this in his face and say, hey, Gurley's got the hardest playoff schedule, you sure you want to keep him, something like that, see if you can get him on the cheap.
You should say it like in a more convincing way than that.
Right, yeah, that was the most pathetic thing I've ever said in my life, the way I phrased it, my accent there. But
say.
Yeah, hey there, did you check out the schedule for Todd Gurley by any chance? It's horrible. Yeah.
I was wondering if you wanted to sell Todd Gurley for 30 cents on the dollar because he has a rough playoff run, huh?
Everybody's running to do that.
Right.
But San Fran has the next hardest, the 31st schedule is San Fran. So Carlos Hyde, he's been blowing up. I think similar to Gurley, his receiving usage will keep him kind of afloat. But they could face some really tough fronts, and I could see Hyde being an interesting, I like him. I moved him up a ton on my big board because of the receiving usage. And how Grant Cohen was talking with us, the 49ers insider. They're giving him this tryout right now, and this is kind of, they want to pound him and see if he can take a beating and be their future guy. So I like Hyde to get a ton of work moving forward, but he's going to run into some brick walls in the playoffs. So he might be an interesting sell high candidate if somebody is really high on his last 2 games and you can get some really good value for Hyde. I'd consider moving him. And then Green Bay's the hardest of all the running backs. Doesn't really matter.
They're screwed for other reasons, though, because people are going to be able to stack the box big time against Aaron Jones. Also, keep in mind with Carlos Hyde that, very similar to what you said with Gurley. I mean, Hyde had 9 receptions last game for 83 yards. Right. Insane. So, I mean, if he just had 9 catches for 83 yards and 0 yards rushing, that's a very solid fantasy game.
Still a great day, yeah. So I would say that, like you said, Aaron Jones, you got to be very concerned. moving forward. He's going to face stacked boxes because Hundley can't challenge anybody, and then he gets the hardest playoff schedule. So, a couple weeks ago, he was a popular buy candidate from a lot of people. I even was kind of starting to drink the Kool-Aid. He had like 150 yards, and you think they're just going to pound the rock. But as a guy who's very game flow dependent, he needs them to have a lead to really get anything going. And how often are the Packers really going to have a lead with Hundley leading the charge? Plus, you have the hardest schedule for running backs in the playoffs. He's definitely a guy I'm trying to move right now.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I'm scared to have him. I went against him in a couple leagues recently, and it didn't hurt at all. Although I really do think he's a real talent. I do.
I like him a lot as a running back. The situation around him is so bad right now.
I mean, I know that you love to blow smoke up Tom Brady's ass every chance you get relative to all the other quarterbacks. I mean, how valuable is Aaron Rodgers?